We're back, joined by Joe Guzzardi, and very pleased to say another first-time contributor to our program here at Secure Freedom Radio. Joe is today a media director and senior writing fellow at Californians for Population Stabilization. He has about 28 years of experience, hands-on involvement in the immigration issue and the immigrant community, including as a teacher for many years in the public schools of California. He joins us from Pittsburgh, however, my old hometown. Joe, great to have you with us. Welcome aboard.
Thank you very much for inviting me, Frank. A pleasure to be with you.
We reached out to you initially because you've been writing for some time, of course, about what's happening to California, and it's much on our mind at the moment, in particular after this really horrific incident involving a man who had been deported, I believe, 5 times, but nonetheless, by virtue of San Francisco being a sanctuary city, which he sought out, he was allowed loose to kill, as he did, unfortunately, this woman, Kathleen Steinle. Talk a little bit about the insights we all should take away from that particular episode, particularly with respect to sanctuary cities.
The murder of young Miss Steinle is really something that, unfortunately, rational thinking people could have predicted. It makes no sense to release criminal aliens back into the general public, something that San Francisco, through its sanctuary city policy, routinely does. And there have been many other incidents prior to Ms. Steinle's death that should have given the city administrators cause for concern, but unfortunately it didn't. And the sanctuary policy has had many enablers, including at the top President Obama, who could not even bring himself to say a few words of condolences to Steinle's family, and more directly, Governor Jerry Brown, who in 2014 passed what's known as the Trust Act, that basically converted all of California into a sanctuary city. So pretty much anywhere that Francisco Sanchez had landed in California, he would have been in a sanctuary city. So it's all ugly, it's all ridiculous. It all should end immediately, and it's somewhat comforting, but not entirely comforting, to know that there are rumblings in Congress that, perhaps some legislation will be passed to make sanctuary cities go out of existence.
Yeah, I actually thought there were laws on the books that already preclude them.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, sanctuary cities are illegal. There is the 1996 Immigration Act says specifically that it is illegal to withhold information from any public official who is inquiring about an individual's immigration status. But the cities ignored it. I believe San Francisco was one of the first, if not the first, to enact sanctuary cities. And other cities, because of the very strong and very well-funded pro-illegal immigration lobby, they quickly followed suit, and we don't get any support from the Obama administration. The Department of Homeland Security, the Department of Justice just looked the other way.
Yeah. This is, again, a case, I guess it's true really of so many of our immigration laws now on the books, that it's not that the laws are deficient as it is a case of them not being enforced, either by the federal government or with either their connivance or their insistence of the local authorities. Joe Guzzardi is our guest. He is with the Californians for Population Stabilization. There doesn't seem to be much stabilizing of the population of California these days, Joe. And in fact, I was listening to a radio program the other day that described with some incredulity, I think it's fair to say, that California is on the cusp of becoming a majority Hispanic state, primarily, I guess, because of these migration flows across our border, most of them illegally. Is that how you see it, and what are the implications of that?
That's where it's headed for sure. CAPS, Californians for Population Stabilization, did an analysis of what is pushing these huge population increases in the state. And what we found was, and using California Department of Finance statistics, Census Bureau statistics, California Department of Health statistics, we found that between the decade beginning 2000 to 2010, almost 100% of California's population was driven by immigration, legal and illegal immigration, and children to those immigrants. Almost 100%. About 5 million people or so during that decade. So that's where it's coming from. And even more frightening, Frank, is that the California Department of Finance very recently, released projections that the state's population would hit 50 million by 2050. We're at just a tick under 40 million right now. By 2050, there'll be about a 38% increase in population to 50 million. And if your listeners are having trouble grasping what that's going to mean, just imagine being in Los Angeles, being in Sacramento, being in San Francisco, and having 38% more cars on the road. I mean, that's what the reality boils down to.
To say nothing of all of the other demands on social services and the like. And Joe, I'm reminded as you talk about this, first of all, there's a drought underway the last time I checked, and that could only be infinitely more acute a problem if you have a 38% increase in the population out there, isn't it?
I mean, everybody who comes to California, whether they come to live permanently or whether they're tourists on a vacation, they're water consumers, and you just can't get away from the fact that adding more people to California's population exacerbates the drought. Of course, that's a place that Governor Brown and the other advocates don't want to go. What they like to say is, well, Kim Kardashian uses more water than the illegal immigrant in East LA. Well, that may be true, but it's beside the point. Everybody uses water. The fewer water users we have in the state, the better off we're going to be.
In terms of a magnet for still more illegal aliens to come to the state of California, and by the way, they don't necessarily stay in California. There's a lot of migration out of California these days, too. But you were mentioning to me before we began this interview 2 pieces of legislation now under consideration in the state legislature. Talk about them briefly, if you would, Joe Guzzardi, and what they might do to contribute to this problem that you're describing.
Well, both of them would be huge magnets to people who are considering coming to California illegally. The first one is a bill that would provide unlimited health care for the children of illegal immigrants. Children under 18 would be entitled to comprehensive medical coverage if this one bill passes. It's Assembly Bill 4. And then a second bill is in the works, moving through assembly committees, that would give permanent residency to any of California's agricultural workers, assuming the legislature could get President Obama's seal of approval on such a piece of legislation. So it's a little more complex, but what it boils down to is that all of California's ag workers would become permanent residents with all of the entitlements that are given to legal permanent residents, assuming President Obama is willing to give it his blessing.
Yeah, which we have to assume, given his track record, would be the case. It's a
yeah.
y'all come kind of signal that we would be sending to an awful lot more folks coming up to work in those fields, especially Joe Guzzardi, with his domestic policy advisor being Cecilia Munoz, who was until recently the head of La Raza, an agitation operation that is promoting, among other things, the Reconquista program of turning California and I guess Texas and other parts of the United States back to Mexico where it belongs, in their view. So much to talk about. Joe, I hope you won't be a stranger. We'll look forward to doing so again in the near future. We'll look forward to talking to the rest of you again tomorrow. Same time, same station. Until then, thanks for listening.